Lucky, and welcome all to the 464th Imagine series of really imagining a better Buffalo. And it is a program hosted by what I think is one of the pillars of our community, the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. So thank you again for being the host, and thank you all, as I mentioned, for being here. We're going to start with our speaker in a minute or two, but I just wanted to touch on a couple housekeeping items. Everyone watching will be muted while the speaker presents, and then she and I actually kick off the conversation. But we're urging you to join in. If you have a question or a comment, please type it into the chat box, and then Melissa will feed it to us, and we'll address it. So, and hey, you know the program is being recorded. You'll be able to you'll be able to watch it, you or anyone in your network, anytime on the Downtown Library's Facebook page and YouTube channel. So we encourage you to do that. It's part of the reason for the program, not only to have this discussion in real time, but obviously have it in the catalog so people can read it out of interest, doing research and whatnot. Okay. With that, now on to our featured speaker. Nira Johri is the vice president recently, just a couple weeks ago, for global inclusion and sustainability with Rich Products Corporation, where she leads the enterprise strategy for diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainability. In her time at Rich's, Nira has led the process to establish and meet Rich's first greenhouse gas reduction target, converted all US-based palm to sustainable supply, and established external leadership programs for underrepresented associates. Yeah, and I'll go on a little bit more just to give you some deeper background. Prior to Rich's, Nira spent 5 years building the cocoa industry's collective impact sustainability strategy in West Africa and Brazil. Nira previously consulted with Unilever, one of the giants in the industry, and other global organizations on a wide range of sustainability topics, and also served in the Obama administration championing Asia-Pacific policy priorities. She's a board member of the Western New York Sustainable Business Roundtable, which I am a proud member of, my company as well, and Equal Origins, as well as Impact Fellow with the Sustainability Food Lab. So I'm going to, with great honor and pleasure, welcome Nira and ask her to join in and tell us a little about her and her roles past, present, and as she sees the future. Thanks.
Thanks, JD, and thanks so much for having me. I'm a big fan of the public library. I read all of my ebooks through your app, so thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me today. I am definitely glad to tell you a little bit about myself, but I thought we'd kick off just with a high-level introduction to Rich's. Melissa has a video just that talks a little bit about some of our work. We'll give you a high-level overview. Thanks. Sorry, I was muted there. I couldn't come off. So that gives you a nice overview, I think, of Rich's work on diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainability. I was asked to join Rich's about 3.5 years ago, really to think about how to bring some of those pieces together. So to think about our impact on not only the planet, but the people on this planet. They can't coexist without each other. And really to think about those long-term ambitions. For those of you that don't know, Rich's is a $4.5 billion family-owned private company. And one of our guiding principles, one of our guiding lights almost, is the desire for the Rich family to continue to own the business into the long term and to remain a family business for the long term. And so I think just even in our orientation of how we operate, you have that frame of long term, because we can make decisions and trade-offs in different ways than public companies because of that. And my role, I come from a hybrid background. I've worked in the public sector, I've worked in the private sector, I've worked at NGOs. So I really bring a perspective of how all of these sectors come together and work together. And sort of understanding so much of sustainability and inclusion work is around stakeholders and stakeholder engagement and understanding the individual perspectives of how each of those stakeholder groups needs to benefit as part of the work. So you saw a little bit in the video, our sustainability work is really focused around climate change. That includes our greenhouse gas emissions, our water, and our waste footprint. We also think about responsible sourcing of our ingredients. We buy a lot of food products and ingredients to make some really wonderfully celebratory products for all of those great occasions in your life. But they all come from someplace. They're all produced and harvested and sourced from people who often come from a lot less than the people who are buying them. And then lastly, we focus on sustainable packaging. We're finding that the package a product comes in is now as important as what's inside. Consumers want to see good solutions for their packaging, and how we think about building all of that is part of the work that we do. And then when we talk about our diversity, equity, and inclusion work, our goals really are around building an inclusive culture. We talk about particularly our talent, our associates. And we never want anyone at Rich's to have less than an exceptional experience. So really a lot of the work that we do is to make every population, every group at Rich's feel included. We place a focus on underrepresented populations, so populations that could be better represented in the organization. And then we also focus on equity and access. So really thinking about our policies, our processes, making sure that everyone has the same opportunities and has individualized and unique support to achieve the goals that they would desire for themselves. So that's a little high-level overview about me and a bit of the work.
I am unmuted. Thanks, Nira. Yeah, interesting video, because it drops right into one question that I'd like to ask of you, but maybe a little bit of background. You know, I'm a bit of a skeptic by nature, and there's a lot of skepticism around, you know, DEI, sustainability. In my field of investing, it's ESG, environment, social justice, and fair and open governance. So, but I was pleased to see you had some metrics, you know, something that can be, because in, you know, my life and because I'm a businessman, like if you can't measure and report on it, I don't want to talk about it. So yeah. Where do those metrics come from?
So we align to pretty common standards. So just as there are financial accounting standard bodies, there's a growing space in sustainability of third-party providers who essentially set the standards for the sustainability industry. And so we align to really those common measures, and then there are different protocols and science-based initiatives that also help you think about how to do the math, how to verify, how to assess your progress in the correct way. And then we also work with third-party partners who validate some of that work. So for example, we're a member of an organization called How to Recycle, and they are the ones, we submit all of our packaging specifications to them. They come back and they give us a delineation of whether a package is recyclable or not. And so we can't make that up, right? We have to go based on the label that they give us, and they have, again, scientists or people on staff who are looking at what the recycling infrastructure is, what is most widely recyclable. So we base it on really external third-party best practice and standards. And then we work internally with the data that we do have, and then externally with third parties when we can't do the number crunching ourselves to come up with the figures.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I just want to kind of add on to, you mentioned the, third party external standards that are being set. The generally accepted accounting principles gap is what accountants adhere to, and those in the sustainability industry are developing SASB. It's the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board. So there's a lot of work being done on a lot of levels. I bet you being, having experienced the NGO and then also the nonprofit sector and government, and now in the private sector is very valuable. That's interesting. So let's talk about someone like you. You've been there 5 years. Where and I mentioned you just were made vice president. Where do you fall in the org chart? So how important is it? Is it way over in a lower left and it never has any input? Where does sustainability and inclusion at Rich fall into the big scheme?
Yeah, well, I think, one of our goals for sustainability at Riches is really to embed it into the way that we operate, right? To have it closely linked and connected to our business strategy. I sit in the HR function and I report to our chief HR officer. So I can tell you for sure that it is prioritized. It's one of the most important topics I think that our leaders are thinking about, and that we're integrating deeply into our business planning and strategy for future years. So for us, it has to live within the way we operate. It can't be something that I do alone, and it has to live within the functions, right? We partner really, really closely with our procurement team who buys those ingredients and those packages. We partner really closely with our supply chain team that is running our factories and thinking about our operations. They're already doing so much work on efficiency and reducing waste. How do we strengthen some of that work in partnership with them? And then all of the work that we do on the DEI side is really connected to our talent strategies. We, again, don't have separate ways that we think about different populations. We integrate that into the way that we approach talent overall at Riches. So I think it's in our day-to-day fabric. It's how we operate, and it's important and a priority for our executives.
Yeah, thank you. And just to give folks a sense of, when Nira said she reports into the head of HR, at Rich Product. You can go to their website and you'll see it'll come up. It's Ed Moore, and he's part of the one of 4 or 5 in the executive team. So that's exciting. I mean, this is good stuff. Remember, old guy like me, this really didn't exist 7, 10, 12 years, 15 years ago. So it's really exciting. There's this moral imperative. There's this, I don't know, this human resource component. But the end of the day, a $4 billion business, whether you're public or private, has to make a profit. That's the way capitalism goes. So how does and here? Okay, so you have this very vibrant, inclusion and sustainability initiative that is integrated throughout the operations of your company, and it reports up to a senior person. But how's it help Rich Products be more profitable?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. First, central to our success is our associates, right? We can't do anything in our organization. We can't produce the products. We can't run the business without those people. And I think one really, really fundamental way that we think about this is something that's important to our associates, right? That's why it's central to our talent strategy as well. Even the planet side, right? They're connected there of how we engage and commit to our associates of being a company that does care about our people and our planet impact. We know that associates, especially in a remote workforce or a hybrid workforce, have a lot of choices, right? And we want to be an employer of choice, and we want to ensure that we are upholding the expectations of a company like ours. I think we also see, JD, you asked about profitability, and I think one thing we started tracking a couple of years ago, the requests that come in from our customers on sustainability, and sustainability now makes up 65% of our US-based customers are querying and asking or requiring different standards from us on sustainability. So that's a pretty large number. That's a pretty large percentage. And we often, are driven by the changes the benefit comes to that other 35% almost through the work that we do to the 65%. But I think the other place to look, you're a market guy, and we can look at the market, right? So over half of the growth in consumer-based products came from sustainably marketed products, even though they only make up about 17% of the market. So there's proof in the pudding around products that customers want. They want sustainability in the products that they're buying, and we're seeing that demand only grow. And the same is true for performance when you look at diversity metrics. So if you look at boards and leadership teams or organizations that are gender balanced, you look at organizations that represent their local or regional workforce the best, those organizations are outperforming those that aren't making those a priority. And so there's, I think for women, it's around 25% outperformance. For the race and ethnicity diversity, it's about 36%. So you can look up, easily the business case on both of these, and there's repeated proof points that investing in this work within your organization has greater returns for you in the short and long term.
Yeah. Well, that's encouraging, like us just as individuals, and therefore being consumers that, and I think probably everyone on this call and most people, a lot of people, are conscientious about how they spend their money. And it's nice to hear that it's making an impact, like if I'm going to buy X from Y and Y buys something from you, they're querying you like, hey, I need this to be whatever, sustainably sourced and so on and so forth. Maybe fair trade-ish type of stuff. That's really cool. Good to hear. Just, I'm going to mention an experience I had at Rich Products around this, because I found it interesting that Nira said, hey, our associates which are so important to our company, and a guy who's in the investment business, I look at the people as much as anything. Without good people, the business is not going to be sustainable. And I'm talking sustainable from a pure financial metric. But anyway, so I'm down at Rich Products having lunch with a friend in the atrium, and the new CEO at the time, Richard Frenne, comes by, and I'm introduced as, hey, he's a sustainability guy. Dude, this man who I know, he's running a $4 billion worldwide company. I know he's busy. His eyes light up. I kid you not. I have no reason to be, touting Rich Products. I don't have any stock in it. Anyway, and he sits down and spends, 25-35 minutes. And he was so knowledgeable. And I'm knowledgeable, and I consider myself a know-it-all in it. Anyway, I learned things in this 35 minutes with Richard. And he did say, hey, I need to attract the best and the brightest, innovative, forward-looking people. And I've got to be, so that constituency, I need to be sustainable, let's say. And then he talked about his clients, your customers are demanding it, that being another constituent. Another was the regulators. I noticed in your video about the, kind of like this circular use of water, and there are regulations going on around the world because water is in tight supply, So he has to do it for now 3 constituents. And another important one, Nira mentioned the ownership. It's a privately held company, mostly, if not exclusively family. And Richard said, and they're getting younger. And this is important to them. I tell you, I walked out of there feeling more hopeful.
Yeah.
I really did. And so talk about that role that just kind of a vision, a hopefulness plays in this field, because it can get depressing too. Anyway.
Yeah. I I think you don't do sustainability or DEI work unless you are some version of a hopeful and optimistic person. And I think the story you told, JD, about the rich family, we talk a lot about generations, right? It's how we think about our purpose. We want to nourish generations to come. And when I think a lot of the work we do, I may never see the full impacts of it. Like I won't be here in 2080, right? And so, these things are long-term impacts that we're trying to achieve, and you may not always see the fruits of those labors immediately, but we are trying to leave behind a planet that is survivable, right? All of the signs are telling us we're not doing a good job, that the world we're going to be living in even 10, 15 years is going to be a much more uncomfortable one, whether that's talking about from a social justice perspective, or how hot and how tough the weather patterns are in our local places and spaces. And so you can't be a business operating today without regard for that long-term impact that you're having. But to do the work, you have to stay fresh, and you can never do it from a place that's frustrated, because these problems are hard and complex and can rarely be solved by one person. Those demand signals that you mentioned, right? The pressure of customers, the regulatory environment, the associates coming together is actually what enables us to do the work in an easier way, because there is demand, right? It is something that the world is looking for.
That's great. Let me just pause for a minute and ask Melissa if any questions have come in through the chat.
There is one question. The person said they may have missed this, but what is the source of Rich's sustainability standards and practices?
The source. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to answer that. So it depends on what we're talking about. So let's say for our greenhouse gas emissions, we align to the greenhouse gas protocol. When we're talking about our ingredients, it's a wide range. So if we're talking about palm oil, we align to a widely known third-party certification called the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. If we're talking about packaging, we look at those standards that are set by organizations like How to Recycle or the ISO. So again, lots of external third-party bodies that do these certifications and verifications. And then in some cases, we're required to align with them. Sometimes we can derive from them and also use them internally.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like there's an organicness to it, and there's even like I've been reading lately, there's some pushback from various sectors of society on ESG, and sustainable investing and the whole thing. I mean, there was a recent, it was a front page article. I can't remember which company. I think it was HSBC was a presence here, and their chief sustainability officer kind of went, whatever, like maybe this isn't all it's cracked up to be, although I think it was taken out of context and whatnot. But I think what I'm learning, or just remembering again and learning here, is like Nira said, there's demand for this, demand from these 4 constituents at Rich Products. I mean, they're responding to demand. They're not just responding to regulation or to being woke. I mean, like it's like hardcore demand by, hey, we only have so much water. Where are your operations around the world that might be, let's say, a little bit, water might be I'm assuming it's a huge component of your product and manufacturing. Where might that be a difficult issue?
Yeah, well, we have operations all over the globe, and I'm going to get the number wrong, so I don't want to give it incorrectly, but definitely over 25 countries, I believe, across the world. We're growing rapidly, obviously, in places like China and India that have obviously massive population growth. So there's definitely pressure on water systems there. We see directly in India, The regulation is what has led to some of our circular water systems in our plants, but we've also done a lot of work in Latin America. And I think it's important to know, I'm going to forget the two states, but there's a great publicly available tool. It's the, I think it's run by the World Resources Institute. It's called the Aqueduct database, and it shows you places that water risk exists. And we have water risk in 2 or 3 of our plant areas in the US. So it's not just a global issue, but it affects us close to home. If you think about operations in places like California, where there is recurring drought, right? That doesn't just affect homeowners, that affects businesses as well. So it's not just a global issue, it's definitely close to home for those of us based in the US as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it back to home, like, right, the Southwest of the US, but also I liked your global perspective of, using China and India as an example, and, the growth in their population is stressing their, fresh water systems. Yeah, so this thing's global. So it's not, I mean, there was a time where, it felt like it was all local. I mean, when I was a kid, I'm marching on Earth Day, right, type of thing. It felt really local. And then I heard kind of Europe. You guys have operations in Europe, correct?
We do. We have a plant in the UK.
Yeah. So, and I heard it, like Germany and whatnot, they became the leaders. I always thought the US was in the vanguard, and this you cradle to grave and all. And so give us a sense. I know me and maybe most of us are less familiar with India and China. What's the environment there? Are there crunchy granola, tree huggers in India and China, or is that kind of just a born of the 60s in the US?
Well, I think it's tough I would never characterize the people of any country in one bucket. I think that's firstly really, really important, the same way we would in the US. And I'll talk maybe more just globally about how we think about it. The world regionally does progress in different ways and create different demand for sustainability and DEI, and regulation also follows suit, right? Regulation is often a reflection of the people of a country. And so I think we see highest demand in Europe and in the US, but also growing and emerging in Latin America. And then we see slower growth for sustainability in Asia Pacific. But that doesn't mean that, again, and through different variations, India is a great example. They have, through business operations, a mandatory return that must happen to corporate responsibility. And so businesses have to give up, I think it's about 2 to 3% of their earnings to charities or partners in the corporate responsibility space. You see that regulation that we talked about on water and resources that comes out of necessity, but that is really linked also then to efficiency and sustainability outcomes as well. So you're going to see a wide range of where countries and people are at, but you also see those different segments, whether it's regulators, whether it's consumers, creating different types of demands that then those countries are responding to.
Interesting. So Melissa, any other questions come through?
Yes, we do have a question. It's really mainly for JD, but perhaps both have some insight. Do you know what standards the large investment firms use to classify ESG investments within their portfolios?
Yes. First of all, it's a really, and this isn't a patronizing statement. It's a good question, because it really hasn't been fully standardized. There isn't one like the generally accepted accounting principles. That is it. You adhere to that. Like before you can get your books audited and closed and whatnot, you have to do that. So there isn't one. But the good news in the investment community and its its use of environmental, social justice, and fair and open governance analysis. Remember, it's in addition to rigorous financial analysis. So it's just these 3 other layers of analysis. is that big data is in. Big data is in. Big data. Billion-dollar and like multi-billion-dollar industry, mining and then digesting and slicing and dicing and delivering data to my desktop. So, and it's through companies such as where it comes to my desktop and consumers like us, investors like us might be familiar, is Morningstar. They use 5 globes, just like they use 5 stars for performance. And they use 5 globes, 5 being the highest, to rate ESG. And they cut it down. I mean, when I click on, let's say, Unilever, Nira worked at Unilever, I believe, and it's a publicly traded company. And I click, I'll get at least 140 plus to a 240 plus page document on ESG. And it is incredible, you know, and it talks about some of the issues that Nira mentioned. So it's kind of interesting. So that's the public space. For example, and who I deal with is only, it's kind of relevant to the question someone else asked, the earlier question. So in the public space, there is this fast evolving kind of uniform, moving toward a uniform way to assess and rate companies' adherence to these principles. Anything to add to that, Nira, or anything like that evolving in the privately held space?
No, I mean, I think, you know, what I don't know the investing side of this deeply well, but I would say each of the different agencies has criteria that they look at, and they are working on aligning, just because, again, it's really hard to tell what sustainable means across the market. And I know a firm that we had worked with called ERM also does something called ratings and rankings. So they look at how different folks are playing a role. And one thing I would advise also is investors are sometimes underinformed. They rely on public reporting by companies, and a company like us, for example, doesn't do public reporting. So we also don't have external investors, but I think you have to, the data across the system has to be strengthened of the awareness and insights that investors have. So it's always good to sort of double check what companies are doing on your own if you're interested in making those investing decisions.
Yeah. Anything else in the queue, Melissa?
Those were all the questions we had.
Well, we are at the top of the hour. Yeah, this just to let you know, I'm just finishing a book called The Over Story, a Pulitzer Prize winning novel, and this theme, the theme of sustainability is woven through it in every way, from its storyline to its character development to its kind of moral fiber. And so to Nira, you know, I know you a little bit. I've met you a few times, just to let folks know. I initially met Nira through one of our previous guests, Ryan McPherson, who's his Chief Sustainability Officer out at UB. I know Nira a little bit as her role here as a board member. Are you still on the board?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, great. I wasn't sure as your responsibilities expanded, whether you were able to continue on as a board member of the Sustainable Business Roundtable. It's businesses right here, from public, M&T, to private, Rich Products, to small, Signity Financial, to mid-size. It's really exciting. This is happening right in our backyard. It's so good to hear it's happening, you know, in whether Latin America, however you guys kind of look at regions of the planet. So but I look forward to I look forward to months that have 5 Tuesdays, so we can continue this discussion. I think that's all from me. Nira, any closing remarks?
No, thank you again for having me. It was great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for your time, and thanks everyone for joining us. Remember, it was recorded. It's available on the library site, and share it with your networks. And you know, the Imagine Buffalo series will be back next Tuesday. I don't know who the guest is, but I do know that our illustrious host, Dennis Galucki, will be back, and I'm looking forward to it and hope you'll all join us again. So have a wonderful day and take care.